right. Well, welcome, Paul Zingon from Vastex. Paul is has been a guest of mine on Two Regular Guys podcasts, and he's been a guest on our webinars before. So Paul, tell me, heat press or conveyor dryer?
Now, that's the biggest question since we really started making the conveyor dryers for direct-to-garment. It's been about 3 years that we've been working on them, and we're finally starting to see it really expand just because people are starting to understand the difference between the heat press, the look, the feel of it, and actually the conveyor dryer. The big thing with the conveyor dryer is you're not having physical pressure on it. So you don't get that glossy look. Sometimes you get that heat transfer look. You can dull the colors, lose some detail, just because you're putting all that pressure on it. By running it through a conveyor dryer, you don't have any of that. Aside from that, you can just lay it on the belt, worry about pre-treating your next shirt, printing your next shirt. You're not babysitting a heat press, waiting for it to pop up. You're letting your shirt go through the dryer, comes out at the end, and it's done.
You know, Paul, we definitely see, a lot of folks who have one machine, certainly if they're also working from home, will use a heat press. But once they get that second, third, fifth machine, most everybody goes to a conveyor dryer. Is that what you see as well?
That's what we see a lot. Yeah, a lot of people, they'll start with the heat press, but once you have multiple printers, you want to focus on the printers instead of curing the shirt. So being able to lay it there and just go worry about the next shirt, it really is a big convenience thing, and it's a speed thing for them as well.
Right, exactly. So let's stay on a conveyor dryer since that's your product. And a lot of folks you'll see out there on the internet. We've already hit the internet a couple of times talking about, hey, not everything out there is true. I hope you guys are all aware of this. But something you see a lot on the internet is you must have forced air to cure a water-based ink, specifically DTG ink. Is that true?
It's not. The big thing is, obviously, it's understanding how it works, how it dries. What you want to do is remove the moisture from the ink. That's how it dries. And I know you talked about that with the pre-treat and the salt water, removing moisture from your white layer. It's all the same, just getting moisture out of the ink to get it to fully cure. So what's happening with forced air is you're taking that moisture that's trying to come out of the shirt and you're blowing it back down into the shirt essentially. So you could do it with forced air, but you need to superheat that forced air. Now, if you have 800 degrees at your heating element, you're blowing air through it. Now the air hitting the shirt is 300 degrees, 200 degrees. It's like putting a pot of water on your cooktop, trying to boil the water and putting a fan on it. It actually cools it down unless you're superheating that air. We have a really powerful exhaust system. So what we're doing is getting that moisture out of the chamber. So every one of our DTG dryers, almost every one of our dryers in general do have an air evacuation system or air exhaust system.
When you think about it too, anybody who's used a conveyor dryer for DTG curing, there's no forced air in conveyor or in heat presses either. So
yeah. And I mean, whether you're using a hover press or physical contact with the heat press, there's no air movement there. So
right, exactly.
You can understand that the heat press works. Why can't a conveyor dryer without blowing air down work?
Exactly. So, speaking of pre-treat, what about curing or drying a pre-treat in a conveyor dryer? Do you have people doing that?
No, that's probably the next biggest question that we do get is they want to use one dryer for everything. You can use it for pre-treat, but we always recommend using your heat press just to mat down the fibers because you do want the smoothest surface possible to print on. So obviously that last, 2-3 seconds with the heat press, I don't know what you guys recommend, but a few seconds after it comes out of the dryer, heat press it, get that last tiny little bit of moisture out, get a nice smooth surface to print on, and that'll give you your best results.
And I agree with you. I think that a heat press is still going to be part of the process, even if you use a conveyor dryer for most of the curing, because again, with direct-to-garment printing, you get such fine detail by laying those fibers down. It makes for a better presentation to your customer, and that's the bottom line, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, the nice thing is you could do that at any time. If you have to do
Sure.
50 shirts, you can do that. Pre-treat them, heat press them after you run them through the conveyor dryer, and come back and just start worrying about printing. You can turn off that heat press and not have to worry about it while you're actually doing your production run.
Exactly. So talk to us a little bit about time and temperature for curing a water-based ink.
Sure. Now, time and temperature, obviously it'll vary from shop to shop based on your humidity in the shop, what ink you're using, how much pre-treat you're using. I know a lot of people overspray, underspray. That could make a big difference too. But really, what we're seeing is 2 to 3 minutes. 2.5 is kind of our starting point. We say you're going to be about 2.5 minutes. We see some people that are getting better times and closer to 2 minutes. But it all depends on your temperature. So how our dryers are made are there's a boost zone in the front, and then there's a second zone in the back. So the boost zone is a very small area. What happens is we have that at close to 1,000 degrees on a lot of the dryers. So you're getting your ink up to temperature really, really fast, kind of like a heat press. As soon as it hits the heat press, it gets it up to temperature really fast. That's what this boost zone does. You want to get that ink up to 320 quickly. Now, if we kept that temperature on the heater like that the rest of the way, it'll keep climbing and climbing. Now you overheat your ink, you're over curing it. So now that back heater, that back zone, which is probably 75–80% of the dryer, is 500 degrees, 600 degrees. Again, that'll vary depending on the dryer, but that's really to hold the temperature. So you get it to 320 and hold that for if you're in there for 2.5 minutes, 2 minutes of that is at your cure temperature. So you get a really nice good cure.
You know, Paul, and as you were saying, it depends on your environment. A dryer in Louisiana is going to be way different than a dryer here in Phoenix, Arizona, because you know we have 10% humidity. They have 110% humidity.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about how you guys suggest to customers how to test for proper cure.
Sure. The best way for us, and this is how we do all our testing, we create dryer profiles with all the dryers that go out. We use a temperature probe, an Atkins probe or a donut probe. I know a lot of people are familiar with them in the screen printing industry because we're running through everything through the dryer anyway. So we're a little bit more familiar with it. Direct to garment, you can't really use that on a heat press. So you may not have that in your shop.
Just once. You can only use it one time.
Yep. You forget that on the heat press and you're in trouble. But it's probably one of the most important tools that you have because you need to know your ink is fully cured. And by using the temperature probe, you're actually, it's a ring. I should have grabbed one. I know we did one. I did the webinar with you guys. It's a ring. It has 2 wires that cross in the middle. You basically press it down in the ink, push it down so it's reading the actual temperature of the ink, not the surface, the actual inside of the ink, because that's really what matters for your temperature. You need that to a cure temperature. It has a long wire on it to a controller, so you can watch that shirt going through the dryer, see where it hits temperature, see where it hits that 320 degrees, if it gets too hot, if it drops. It's really nice to have that when setting up your dryer because you can say, you know what, I'm not reaching my 320 degrees until it's almost coming out of that dryer. So that's just not enough dwell time. That tells you, you know what, I need my boost heater a little hotter or my second zone a little bit higher so I can keep that temperature. Really, really important to have a donut probe.
Well, yeah, and you know, your point's well taken in that garment, if it has moisture in it, we don't really care what the surface temperature of that ink is. We want to know what it is all the way down to the base of the shirt.
Yeah, because that's what's holding it onto the shirt is that bottom layer of ink.
Exactly.
If the bottom layer of ink isn't fully cured, it's coming off in the first wash.
All right, last question for you, Paul. What are the advantages and disadvantages? I'm sure you have people back when we had trade shows. You had people walk into your booth and say, "Am I ready for a conveyor dryer for my DTG printer?" What are the advantages or disadvantages?
you can always be ready. And a lot of people think we have to have multiple printers to really make it worth it, but we do make DTG dryers for a single machine. For our smaller machines, we do have nice small footprints where they're about 3 feet wide, about 4 feet long. So they're nice small footprints. Obviously, a heat press is a little bit smaller. So if you're very tight on space, you could see that as a negative versus some of the bigger dryers. All of our dryers will be a 240 on the DTG end just because we do have higher wattage in them. So you do need to make sure you have a 240 volt. You can't get away with a 120 plugging into a standard household outlet like sometimes you do with the heat press. But really the benefits are you get what a lot of our customers tell us is a retail ready shirt. There's no box around it from the pre-treat. There's no potential for scorch marks from the heat press, and it's just it's a more screen printed looking print.
Right.
A lot of our customers really like that, and they do like the sellability of that.
Super. Well, Paul, really appreciate you coming on and sharing this information about curing, and we will see you at the end in our group discussion. Thanks so much.
Sure, we'll see you in a bit.